Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Jak and Daxter Analysis, the series where I go through each area of Jak and Daxter and analyze each objective and explain what does and doesn't work. If this is the first of these that you're watching, you should watch these from the start. I'll link the playlist below. Last time we looked at the Fire Canyon, the first level to link the different hubs together. The next few videos will be focusing on the levels surrounding the second hub, Rock Village. The Precursor Basin is likely the first level people will encounter when first arriving in the new hub. This level focuses entirely on the zoomer, so this will be interesting. In this series, I have gone over a few sections with the zoomer, and I was fairly easy on them because they were the first encounters. This time, I'm going to be more critical of the objectives, because this is at the point where the game is confident that the player is experienced enough with the zoomer to be able to handle an entire level. The design of the level is pretty cool. There isn't really any large spaces of just flat land aside from the pools of water. Just like the on-foot platforming, there's always something the player will have to maneuver around or over as you're exploring the level. Now, it's probably just because we're on the zoomer, but the level feels really small in comparison to the other levels. But what is here is pretty good. There is one new enemy type here, but they're exclusive to one mission, so I'll go over it when I get there. Now, I think the amount of enjoyment players will get from this level will depend on how much they enjoy using the zoomer. Personally, I really like using it, but I can understand why some players wouldn't. That being said, I'm not using it as an excuse for some of the more poorly executed objectives here. I'm just saying that some of these wouldn't be enjoyable if you don't like using the zoomer in the first place. So, let's look at the power cells. Herd the moles into their hole. The geologist from Rock Village has been studying these lightning moles that live in the Precursor Basin. She says that the lurkers have scared them from their underground homes onto the surface, and they can't find their way back because they're blind. So we're tasked with herding them back underground by chasing them into their holes. And that's pretty much it. We need to chase these moles around until they decide to jump back into their holes. It's not very fun. Sometimes you'll be chasing one for a while, and they'll finally reach their hole, then decide to walk straight over it.
Frustrating.
Luckily, it isn't hard at all. You just have to chase them until they jump back in, so there isn't really any risk of failure. For what it is, it's harmless, but I'd expect a bit more from the zoomer's dedicated level. Catch the flying lurkers. This is the mission with the new enemy type, the robber. This is the only time these guys appear in the game, and once you complete this mission, they will never be seen again. There are 4 of these guys just lazing about in the level. However, one of them has a power cell, so we need to kill them all. Once we get close to them, they'll jump awake and start flying away, and we have to chase them. They each have their own predetermined loop around the level they'll fly around. We pretty much just have to chase them until we get close enough to hit them. How long it takes us to get close to them is dependent on how well we drive while chasing them. If you drive really well, cut corners effectively, and don't let your speed drop too much, you can get these guys in under a lap. But it'll take most people about 1 to 3 laps to get them, sometimes more. It pretty much depends on being at a consistent speed. If you try to anticipate their turns too much and try to get in front of them, they'll immediately turn around and fly the opposite way without losing any speed. So when cutting corners, you need to be very aware of where you are in relation to the lurker. Once you hit all 4 of them, the last one will drop a power cell. This mission is alright, it's nothing amazing, but it is a decent test of the player's ability to drive fast and consistently. Beat the record time on the gorge. So the gambler back in Rock Village wants us to beat the time trial on the Dead Man's Gorge, and if we do, he'll give us a power cell. The record time is 45 seconds, so it's pretty much just a race against the clock. The track never changes, so if the player struggles with it, they can just practice and learn the track until they get it. The track itself is pretty cool. You drive above the rest of the level, going in and out of the massive precursor structure that's in the middle of the level, and then exit at ground level near the entrance of the track. There's blue eco clusters to help us go faster, but back lurkers to launch us into the air if we need to, and quite a few dark eco crates that serve as a hazard. There's also these piston things that go in and out of the walls that are easy to crash into, which will cause you to come to a halt, which causes you to lose heaps of time. The track is mostly a linear path, but towards the end, there are a few small choices we can make. Once we land down here, there are a few piston things, a lurker, and a raised platform. If we can run into the lurker while avoiding the pistons to get onto the raised platform, we can get a blue eco cluster at the end of it. However, doing this is quite challenging without losing any time. The only way to get onto the raised platform is to run into this lurker, and it's really hard to hit him because the piston is right in front of him, so we either have to wait for it to retract, or try to weave around it, hit the lurker, and still try to land on the platform. Or we could get lucky and land at the right time to be able to just ride through and hit the lurker. This scenario is very risk versus reward. The reward, if pulled off successfully, is obviously getting the blue eco to get us to the finish line quicker, but the risk is failing and losing lots of time. If we miss the platform, there's another fork in the road. Both lead to the finish. The one on the left just goes straight through, but on the right is a short path with some dark eco crates and a blue eco cluster. This is another risk-reward situation. The path on the right doesn't take very long to navigate to get the blue eco, but the risk of hitting a dark eco crate is pretty high. The reward, however, is pretty good. Not only do you get the speed boost from the blue eco, but when taking the path on the right, you just have to keep driving straight to get to the end, as opposed to the left path where you have to turn into the exit. Again, a nice instance of choice. All in all, the race is pretty solid. The time of 45 seconds isn't too hard to beat, and the track is nicely crafted. My only complaint is once completed, there's no incentive to go back and beat your time. I wish that as well as getting the power cell, a scout fly for the level was a reward for a certain time, or some precursor orbs. That would have been awesome. Maybe when going for each reward, the time needed to be beaten not only got stricter, but maybe some minor changes could have been made to the track to make it more difficult, like different placements of blue eco clusters and dark eco crates and stuff like that. Stuff like this is what I wish the game had more of to give it more longevity, but as it is, it's pretty good. Get the power cell over the lake. This one is pretty cool. It's the first real test of your zoomer platforming skills. There's a power cell chilling high above the water, and the only way to get it is to jump off of this ramp, and the only way to get there is to follow this path, make a few jumps between these platforms, then drive up here where you'll reach the highest point in the level. From here, you'll have to platform across these small platforms, heading down towards this platform. Once landed safely, you can then use this ramp to jump over the lake and get the power cell. This mission is essentially the same as the one that was on Misty Island, except elevated in difficulty and scale. I really like this mission. It's a really good test of the player's zoomer platforming ability. I also think they got the difficulty just right with this one. It isn't too hard, but it's not the easiest thing to do either. Some may say it's hard because when you fail, you need to climb all the way back up, but that's more of an annoyance than a source of difficulty. And I don't mind that you need to do that either. It reinforces that you need to get good at the platforming to get this power cell. But I do understand the frustration that can come with this mission. Cure the Dark Eco infected plants. There are these plants that have been infected by Dark Eco, and Samos tells us that we need to cure them with Green Eco. There's a Green Eco vent here, and once we power up with it, we need to drive over the plants. This cures them and they'll sink into the ground. Although this doesn't last very long. If we cure a plant and wait a short amount of time, the plants that are still infected will reinfect the cured plant, which means we have to cure all the plants within a short time span to cure them for good. Easier said than done. While this mission isn't terribly difficult, it is pretty annoying. The Green Eco vent is pretty far away from the plants, so when we run out of eco, we have to drive all this way to power up, then drive back to continue where we left off. All the while, the travel time between the plants and the vent is using up our Green Eco and our time. But the real problem comes from dealing with the actual plants. When driving over them, we need to take it slow and be thorough not to miss any. This is a bit hard because the zoomer's turning radius is pretty big, which doesn't allow for small turns while moving. You need to be very aware of letting go of the accelerator when turning here. Even if you are, sometimes you need to be moving slightly to position yourself correctly, but you can't be moving if you want to have a small turning circle, which you also need to position yourself correctly. If even one of these two problems were present in this mission, it would be annoying. But because they're both here, it makes it a lot worse. Even if the vent was closer, it would not make it a good mission, but it would make it a bit easier. For this one, I think they should have taken it back to the drawing board. The large turning radius for the zoomer doesn't blend with a mission that takes even this small amount of precision. Maybe a better way to do this mission would be to have just the one Green Eco vent somewhere around the middle of the level, and have a smaller amount of the plants spread across the entire level. Then we'd have to find them, power up with the Green Eco, and try to get to the plant as fast as possible to cure it before the eco runs out. That sounds like a much more fun way to do it. The mission as it is now isn't terribly hard once you get the hang of it, but I can understand newcomers and inexperienced players getting frustrated with this and feeling like it's wasting their time by making them drive back and forth. Personally, I don't mind it too much. I can finish it fast and be done with it, but it is pretty poorly designed. Navigate the purple rings, the dreaded rings. So there are two missions that have you flying through some rings on a set course, and taking too long to fly through them will cause you to fail the mission. The first one is the purple rings, and this one isn't too bad. To start, we need to drive to this point of the level and fly through the first ring for the rest to start appearing. This footage should speak for itself what actually goes on when playing the mission, so I'll let it do the talking. As you can see, there's no map or any indication of where the next ring is going to appear, so in order to follow them properly, we need to pay attention to which direction the ring is pointing. A big reason a lot of players find these two ring missions frustrating is because when trying to navigate the rings, sometimes it'll appear the ring is leading you to go one way, but the next ring appears in a different place. The reason this seems to happen a lot is because the game doesn't indicate very well that the rings are facing a different way, therefore the players don't realize to pay attention to that small detail of the design and assume that Naughty Dog is just fucking with us by sending us in the wrong direction. I'm not trying to say it's everyone else's fault that they find this mission frustrating. The way the ring is facing is hard to pick up when looking at it while trying to concentrate. Perhaps a way to remedy this issue a bit would be to make the border of the rings a different color, or make them a bit thicker. That way it'll be easier to see when the ring isn't facing the same direction you're going. Because as it is, the rings just look like various shapes of oval when facing a different direction. As it stands, the purple rings aren't too hard. They start at this point of the level and loop you around a bit before ending in the air with this final ring. It isn't too hard, and the ring placements, for the most part, are easy to deal with and traverse. Navigate the blue rings. Okay, so the blue rings is where everyone gets a little antsy. To unlock this mission, we first need to beat the purple rings, so it's pretty obvious this is going to be the more difficult of the two. First, we need to drive all the way to this location and jump through the first ring to begin. Some noticeable differences with this mission is a lot of the rings are a lot more spread out, so there's more travel time between the rings, which means the player needs to make sure they're moving fast to not run out of time. Another thing I noticed was when doing the purple rings, most of the time the next ring spawned in the player's field of vision, so they knew where to go. With the blue rings, there are a lot of times where the next ring is not in our field of view, so we need to keep driving for a bit to find it. And this can be a bit stressful when you're concentrating on driving well, and you need to search for the next ring, and then react to where you need to drive. Because of this, it's more likely that you'll end up failing and having to rely on memorizing the ring placements, which would usually be okay, except for one thing. So with both ring challenges, if you fail, you have to drive all the way back to where the ring started to try again. I didn't mention this with the purple rings because the placement of the first ring wasn't hard to get to, but to get to the blue rings you have to drive all the way up this long path which involves platforming. Having to retry once or twice wouldn't be much of an issue, but considering how difficult the mission would be for a newcomer, this is a bit much. Don't get me wrong, I think the difficulty of the mission itself is warranted. After all, this is the only level exclusively using the zoomer, but the travel time just to retry is a bit of a kick in the teeth. What they should have done, and I'm happy to say they fixed this issue in the sequels, is have a retry screen after failing, asking the player if they want to retry or not, which would take them straight back to the first ring. I think that would ease a lot of frustration players have. So, now that we have that out of the way, let's look at the actual mission. The ring placements are in good spots, and while there is a bit of guesswork of where they are sometimes, for the most part they're not too far out of the way. There are a couple of bullshit ones though. Near the start, we loop around this platform, then the next ring is here. Now how the fuck do we get that? Well, we gotta jump off this rock, of course. This is pretty dumb. First of all, how would the player know to launch themselves off this rock? There hasn't been any point where the game has made us use anything except ramps and lurkers to get airborne, so why would we think to use a rock? And what's worse is the way to do it to get enough height isn't clear either. So to get enough height, you either need to drive into the rock at full speed or jump at the right time. Jumping will get you more than enough height, but just driving into it will just get you through the ring. So here's me jumping off the rock at just under full speed. Now again at full speed. Now again, but jumping off the rock. And again, but jumping at the very top of the rock. Big differences, right? To be fair, the window where you need to press the jump button is pretty big, so if you figure that out, you shouldn't have too much trouble with it, but it's not an exact science. Not too far after that one, the rings bring you back down to the transpad. Not anything bad here, I just wanted to say that I remember one time when I was a kid doing this mission, I accidentally parked back on the pad and ended up failing the mission because of it. Also, with this ring right here, be careful not to jump when you go up, because you can jump straight over the thing. I did this as a kid as well. Another kind of bullshit one is here. You have to weave your way around these pillars, which would be fine, but it's not obvious enough that the next ring is here. instead of ahead of where the last one was pointing. So eventually you drive past where you started and make a jump into the final ring. Overall, it's not that bad. I think the difficulty is at a good spot to really test the player, but the whole travel time to retry and the really bullshit rock jump thing does bring this mission down quite a bit. Last power cell is 3-7 scout flies. Usually I don't say anything for this one, but I wanted to say I quite like the placements for these. It's a big open level and I think the placements were appropriate. So let's look at some cool stuff. I really love this precursor structure in the middle of the level. For the most part, it's just for looks, but during the Dead Man's Gorge race, we get to drive through it and it's so cool. I wish there were more massive structures like this in the game that we could fully explore. And the whole trilogy for that matter, goddamn. I also love how when it starts getting dark, all these yellow things throughout the level start to light up and it just looks beautiful. The whole level is a feast for the eyes, it looks amazing. Here's a weird little thing. I discovered this years ago when I figured out how to get into the level on foot, but when I was working on this video, I found out you can do it on the zoomer. If you somehow manage to jump off one of the bridges during the race, it says race aborted. From what I can tell, there's no other way to get this message to appear, and the only way I could do it with the zoomer was with the use of the lurker. Kinda strange, but pretty cool. I do really like the music, but it has the same problem as Fire Canyon. It's too quiet and you can't hear it above the sound of the zoomer. I also really love how a lot of the platforms are built on top of precursor structures. It really shows that this stuff is super ancient and nature has taken it back over. So overall, Precursor Basin is a good level. It's not great and it's not terrible. A lot of the missions were either just okay or poorly thought out. But overall, the level did a good job of giving us a zoomer only level, which is appreciated. So that's enough talking about the zoomer for a while. I've had to do it for the last 3 episodes. Join me next time as we take a look at the Lost Precursor City. I hope you've enjoyed the video enough to stick around this long, and if you have, thank you so much. These analysis videos take a heap of effort. So thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you next time.